I'm Dave.
And I'm Andrew, and together we are the IB English guys. We are IB English teachers, IB examiners, we're teaching partners, and we're here to give students some manageable tips and skills so they can master the IB. Mr. Giles, what should we talk about today?
Today we want to talk about the forgotten stepsister, and we want to talk about the zoom out.
The zoom out. We talked about the zoom in briefly. What is the zoom out, Mr. Giles, and what's going on with this important step?
Yeah, the course guide makes it very clear. Students need to make sure they show knowledge of the extract that they've chosen, but also they need to show knowledge of the body of work as a whole. And that's what the zoom out is. This is where we need to show knowledge of the body of work as a whole. The reason we call it the forgotten stepsister is many times students are consumed with the zoom in where they're looking at that extract and they forget they need to talk about in detail about that body of work
and
as a
I
whole.
think it's important to note that idea of talking about the body of work as a whole or the work as a whole, that's all over criterion A, B, and C for the rubric, so you can't forget the stepsister.
It's the balance.
Mr. Giles, as we're preparing to do this, what are some things that we can ask ourselves as students to make sure we're doing this correctly?
I think we look at two questions. The first question we think about is, where else in the text do we see examples of our global issue? So events and moments in a novel or other poems perhaps, or other ads in an ad campaign. We want to think about where else in the body of work do I see my global issue reflected?
Yeah, and that's great. And I think the second question you want to ask yourself, Mr. Giles, would be, what authorial choices do I see in my extract that are also prevalent in the entire work or body of work? And Mr. Giles, the choices have to matter. We can't talk about alliteration and repetition. We need to look for the big moves that the author has for a literary work, or we need to look at the big moves that the authorship of a non-literary body of work actually employs throughout their works.
Yeah, and remember, we have another video about how to structure your I.O. and where to put the zoom out and when to zoom in and when to zoom out. And I think that's something you might want to look at and think about, where can I put this knowledge of my body of work in my I.O. It's very important.
All right,
so,
Charles, we're talking about zooming in and zooming out. Should we show our students and our viewers what a zoom out looks like?
It's time to break out. Yeah, we're gonna bring back the little guys, and we're going to do a zoom out together. And we want to talk about an extract or a text that I did a zoom in for on an earlier video. And I think we just wanted to review that global issue and review that extract with you for you to understand the context.
Yeah, what was the global issue of that? Well, first of all, what was the name of the text and the author that you were working with?
Good question. Way to start with the text first. It was The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. Again, really, I think a popular text, a text that students and we really enjoy. And the particular story within The Things They Carried was called On the Rainy River. You might remember that story. It's where a young man is deciding whether or not to go to war or to flee to Canada. And he's making this sort of decision, this life-altering decision. And for him, going to war is the cowardly thing. And he does it because of shame and embarrassment. So my global issue for that extract was that in times of war and in times of conflict, sometimes that fear of embarrassment or fear of humiliation can really cause an individual to cross a moral boundary and make an unethical decision.
Okay, so sorry.
That's okay.
No, just to interrupt you. So I guess when we zoom out, we need to look for words like fear, shame, embarrassment, moral boundaries, breaking ethics. Those are the types of things we want to look for elsewhere in the text. Is that correct, Mr. Giles?
That's right. I had three ideas that I talked about in my zoom in. I talked about the personal confession and intimacy with the reader. I talked about the whole idea of the expectation that he would be a hero, and this sort of expectation of being courageous. And I also talked about the reality that sometimes courage is not there when you need it most. And those are things that I talked about in my extract.
So those 1, 2, 3 ideas, those links to the global issue, now we want to find those elsewhere. What do you say we give it a try?
I think we should give it a try. We want to keep an eye on our time and get the little guys rolling, and we'll try a zoom out together to make it more interesting. And
let's do it.
I will start. Okay. We see the global issue of shame and embarrassment affecting individuals to cross moral boundaries in many stories throughout the body of work. In particular, we see in the final story where he has an anecdote where he and his platoon run into a dead corpse. And again, the narrator, in a very confessional way, is admitting that because of shame and embarrassment, he considered crossing the boundary and disrespecting that corpse.
We also see other examples of shame and embarrassment throughout the novel, specifically the chapter titled Ghost Soldiers. And in this moment, Tim O'Brien is shot in the butt, and he is very angry at the medic for not taking care of his wound properly. This causes our character Tim O'Brien to break moral boundaries, and he actually terrorizes the medic. He tries to scare him, and he terrorizes him, all because of the shame and embarrassment that he feels as a result of being shot in the butt. Quite a cowardly wound.
And finally, in the final story, In the Lives of the Dead, he talks about his childhood sweetheart, Linda, who was suffering from cancer and hiding her head from chemotherapy from all of her classmates. And the bully pulls the cap off of this little girl's head. And Tim O'Brien, the narrator, does not stand up for Linda because of the shame and embarrassment for looking cowardly in front of this bully. And again, this shows the global issue quite clearly through the symbol of the red hat.
I think we zoomed out. What do you
think? We zoomed out. Wow. And I think that was again just trying to talk about moments in the text, but also keeping in mind to discuss some of those literary elements that we saw or authors' choices.
Yeah, so that's the zoom out, and it may seem like to our viewers that there's a lot going on, Mr. Giles, as we try to do that. Let's quickly summarize the 5 things that we were attempting to do. What was the first thing that we were trying to do in our zoom out, Mr. Giles?
Well, we were thinking about, first of all, when we chose our global issue for our I.O., we made sure that our global issue was something that is prominent in the text. It's not seen in one isolated moment. There were many moments where we could talk about this global issue. That's important.
Yeah, I think the second thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to clarify and give concrete examples from other moments in the novel, but we couldn't linger and talk about those moments too long. Right? So we wanted to give about 3 examples in our 2 minutes, so we couldn't linger. We had to be pretty clear and concise with our explanations.
Yeah. I think one other thing to consider when you do the zoom out is you can actually make zoom out comments while you're discussing your extract. And if you go back to our previous video when we talked about the different ways to structure your I.O., this is kind of a more blended approach. But don't be afraid while you're talking about a particular move that the author makes in your extract to then, what he would say, go wide and talk about it where you see that particular feature seen in another part of the text, because that shows your ability to show knowledge of the text.
Great. I think the fourth thing that we were thinking about was, at least I was thinking about it, students, you have to remember to signpost. Remember, your examiner is being taken on a journey. Show your examiner the signs where you're going. Now, I would like to discuss the global issue in the body of work as a whole. We also see this global issue in the chapter titled, Give Sentence Stems, Signpost, Alert the Examiner of Where They're Going.
That's right. And I think finally, as I think this video shows you, is make sure you dedicate time to the zoom out, that you dedicate time in your discussion to discussing the work as a whole. This is really important. Be mindful of that, and using the signposting, like Mr. Cohen said, that will help you do that. And that will help just you show that you're the master of this entire text, not just your extract.
And students, with respect to time, as you're practicing, you need to have a clock, a stopwatch in front of you. And you really need to have this, I would say, no longer than 2.5 minutes for this particular section. Otherwise, your whole balance of the I.O. will be thrown off.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Giles.
Speaking of time.
That pretty much concludes what we wanted to say with respect to the zoom out. Once again, we hope that this content is helpful for you. We hope that we're putting value out there for free. If you like this content, let us know more about what you want in the comments below. Subscribe, and we will continue making videos for you. Thank you for watching, and we hope this is helpful. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.